Hey, this is week number 5, and y'all are doing amazing. And I'm hearing so many great stories about relationships and connections and steps of faith. Those of you who are having an amazing group experience, you are some of our best evangelists or folks who other people might listen to who are currently not in a group experiencing what you're experiencing. So I'm relying on you to spread the word that everyone should be involved in the future. Now, 2 things before we jump in. 1, by the time you watch this, we will have already had our advanced commitment event, and I'm hopeful that you are one of the people who was there to experience it. I think we will look back on that event as a spiritual marker of sorts. 2, the purpose of these videos is just a rallying point for your group, a recentering of sorts after a day or 2 or several with some distance from Sunday. So this is not to introduce new information, it's just to remind you and recalibrate around this week's passage. Now, each week we've been asking a different question in relationship to the story about Joshua and the Hebrew people. I want to remind you of some of those. We started here, where we said, where in your life do you need courage right now? Week 2, I asked, what step of faith can you take today so that you can go forward into what God has for you? 2 weeks ago, we wrestled with this challenging question, what are you doing right now by faith that will be worth telling the next generation about? Now, last weekend, being a long holiday weekend, if you missed the message, I really think you need to go back and catch up because what we covered there was really crucial to some next steps I'm asking you to take specifically to the Forward Initiative. I laid out a generosity challenge that I think any of us can participate in, and I did that by asking this question. Is there a step of faith I can take in my generosity that can teach me to trust God more? On the inside back of your forward guide, you will see a staircase of sorts. And the takeaway from last week's message was to simply identify where you are now and challenge yourself by faith to take the next step. This, more than anything else, is how we're going to get 100% participation and at the same time, I believe, actually reach the collective goal that we have. So make sure you check that out. Now, today I'm going to add one more challenging question, and I really love this one, and I think it's just so needed and timely for me personally. We find ourselves in Joshua chapter 10, and you're going to read this with your group, but let me just quickly summarize the really big parts. Joshua and the Israelites are on an all-night march into battle with their next enemy that stands in their way of the promised land. And during the battle, God actually starts fighting for them by raining down hailstones from the sky. It's kind of as if God is fighting with them. And just as they are about to overpower and destroy the enemy, it starts getting dark, and the sun starts to set. And if it gets any darker, some of the enemy is actually going to get away and retreat to safety. And so right there on the battlefield, you read in chapter 10, verse 12, Joshua says a prayer. It's not a long prayer, but Joshua asks God to make the sun stand still. In other words, it's just, God, we need daylight to win this battle, right? To finish this off. Now, here's the interesting thing about it to me is that Joshua prays this thing out loud, like in the presence of all the people. Like everybody hears this. I think if it's me, I mumble that thing under my breath, or I say it inside my head, because if it doesn't happen, then nobody knows. And if it does happen, then I share that with other people as a sort of praise report. And all these centuries later, with some scientific evidence, we know that the earth actually revolves around the sun. He didn't even get the prayer right. Now, when I think about some of the prayers I offer, they seem, I guess, quite anemic and small, if you know what I mean, right? Many of our prayers are actually answered before we even pray them. Can you imagine if Joshua, before the battle, holds a prayer meeting and what they're asking is, God, please be with us. Is that a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing. It's just that God already promised him from the very beginning that he would be with them. Or how about this one? Dear God, please guide us as we go forward. Again, that's a prayer that I pray quite regularly, but one that God has already promised to Joshua. So here, in a moment of complete ridiculousness and faith, Joshua prays for more daylight. And then we read this. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped. Now, I'm not advocating that you pray that prayer, but I hope you'll see the potential that the same God who answered that prayer longs to show himself strong and powerful in your life when you call out in faith so that he receives the glory. Here's the prayer: God, give us more time so we can do more for your name. Now, I want to live my life in a way, I want you to live your life in a way, I want our church to live in a way that people would say, surely the Lord is fighting on their behalf. So here's the question to consider. What is a God-sized prayer that you maybe have never prayed and need to pray so that God might fight for you? We're not talking about getting rich or finding a husband or God, please turn this body into a fitness center sample while I eat these ho-hos. We're talking about, do you have a sun stand still prayer? And maybe you can think about it this way, that if God answered every prayer you've prayed in the last week, would anything actually be any different than it is now? Like in your family or your school, your neighborhood, your workplace. Would anything be different on your team or maybe on your boat? Like, because of the prayers in the last week, would anyone actually come to know Jesus or to know him better than they do right now? So what is a God-sized prayer that maybe you've never prayed and need to pray so that God might fight for you? And I don't know about you, but I don't want to get to the end of my life and be standing before God, right? The one that we have believed in, the creator of the universe, the one who raised his own son back to life, the God who made the sun stand still. I don't want to stand there and have unasked prayers in my pocket because I thought they were just too ridiculous. So maybe we can commit to do this. Maybe we can just, and again, I just love these words, but maybe we can rely on these words from Ephesians chapter 3 that I'll leave with you. It says that God is able to do more than we ask or imagine according to his power. So let's pray some God-sized prayers this week. Let's ask and just see what happens. And then after it happens, or when it happens, we would say, you know what? Only God could have done that.